articulated in a fascinating move. But in that changing landscape, then is a question of, well, where exactly is this realm of public and private, and what is the function of public art? And actually, a very deep question about, should the public, is there still a contract with the public to fund art? And I'm not really convinced that it's discussed enough to say there is. I think the public are unsure why public art is sometimes funded, why art is funded by public money. I think, since Carl Andre's bricks on, it's a very obvious sort of tabloid experience, but I think at a deeper level, both governments and the public in general aren't sure why public money should be funding art. It's very seldom discussed because there's a great fear that if you bring it up, everyone might just take the money away and say, no, we don't believe it, so I think it's a taboo subject in some form, but a fascinating subject, and I think it needs to be readdressed and hasn't maybe been properly addressed since the Second World War, to sort of see what is the relationship. How would you justify art in the public realm funded by public money? And I think there are very good arguments why it should be, but I think the art world needs to have the courage to make those arguments. I think it would be fascinating to hear them do that, and actually sort of quite rigorous self-reflection in order to figure out what those arguments are today in this differing landscape. And I think the other things that came up, we were talking earlier today about the different issues connected to these presentations, and one issue really was about selection. That one question that keeps coming up in institutions such as CCA or on a Beanie is the curated show in a gallery with authority, and how that is a selection process that maybe sort of cuts other people out. I think that is something that's kind of interest to see what's wrong with selection, to say, what's wrong with selection? Why can't we select? So I think everybody selects to a certain extent, but sort of selection is perceived in different ways, and there's an authority within a gallery that can make that overwhelming and actually distort the reasons why there was a selection in the first place, or distort the fact that the selection process happens right across the art world, whether in a gallery or beyond the institution. I think maybe there's not enough rigour in terms of thinking what happens beyond the institution in terms of selection, and also in terms of quality. And I think in terms of quality, we were talking about relational aesthetics, we were talking about public art. Where is the line in terms of how do you say this is good and this is bad? Or do you say that, or is it about the engagement? And how do you measure quality in an engagement rather than in an object? And if it's all about the nature of the engagement, the nature of the experience and the process, is it right to have some kind of measurement about this is good or this is bad? Or equally, can you go as far to say, well, it doesn't matter as long as there is engagement, whether it's good or bad? And there's a whole series of arguments from Claire Bishop to Grant Kester about that, but I think that's an interesting thread that maybe could come up in the next few days. And I think another thing that Suzanne mentioned was that for artists working in the community, it's not really a question of institutions, it's not really a question of their authorities. The relationship that most exercises people is, what's the relationship between the artist and the community? What's the relationship between the artist and the people in the community, the real world, the real people, so to speak, that they're working with, and what happens in the aftermath of that when the artist walks away? Does the credit and does the project go with the artist? What's the lingering experience for the people who worked on that project? And there seemed to be a large kind of spectrum of doubt about that relationship and how valid it was, or how you actually sort of examined that relationship, and so what was the long-term benefits for everyone involved in it. So I think those are kind of questions that were coming up a lot. So I think I should maybe stop there and let people present. So do that. Get a photograph first.